Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I am Collectioner McHenry, and today I'm going to be walking you through the Premier Season 37 North American Playoffs. I'll be kind of walking you through the brackets, how I think it's going to pan out, what sort of form I'm seeing these teams in currently. So go and get yourself a nice little drink, and we'll get this video started. But kicking these off, I'll start off with Payne versus GGPR. We're going to hop over into my little bracket that I've created using some website. I don't know what website it is, but we'll start off with Payne versus GGPR. It will look a little bit different. I think Party Astronauts and Triumph or Switch with Choco Check and Team 1 shouldn't actually affect how the bracket plays out. Everything should fall into place either way. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and hop over into my bracket here, and we will start off with Payne Gaming taking on GGPR. First match of the day, and I think it's going to obviously swing Payne Gaming's way, because if you look at the current form of Payne Gaming, they did actually lose to Team 1. I found that to be a really interesting result over the Mythic Cup, but I think with how Payne Gaming was able to close out, of course, being the number 1 seed and not dropping a single series in Premier. In fact, I don't believe they dropped a single map. Yeah, they finished out the full season flawlessly over in Premier. So with that fact, and the fact that GGPR, they're just not really up to the same level as Payne, I'll go ahead and say it's going to be a 2-0. GGPR will be going down into the lower bracket. Now, I want to also give credit where it's due. GGPR built up a phenomenal team with what they were working with at the beginning of the season. Lowrider and their coaching staff, I've actually told Lowrider this, but he has such a great eye for talent. And so I want to, even though I do think Payne Gaming are going to get the better end of this game, and probably pretty dominantly so, I want to give credit where it's due. I think that they have a phenomenal organization and talent building over at the GGPR roster. So shout out to them, even though it's going to end 2-0. I want to give them some credit there. They're an exciting team, and I'm glad that they are consistently making it into playoffs. Last season had a little bit of an asterisk by it with the whole match fixing stuff, but besides that, made it once again and kind of proved themselves to be a serious team in Premier so far, which is always exciting to see. So next up, we got Extra Salt taking on RBG. I think similar situations here. RBG, credit where it's due. Great team. The issue being is that they have unfortunately rolled the draw of taking on Extra Salt as the first opening match for them. So that isn't going to bode well, in my opinion. The roster over at RBG, very impressive. Again, I like the addition of Classia. They seem to be in great form. They were able to 2-0 Team 1, and they really just squeaked by with the fact that Censored was able to beat Third Impact. They just made it into playoffs. But the thing is, Extra Salt is by far, excluding Payne Gaming, by far the best team in Premier right now, and that'll be a huge issue that RBG aren't going to be able to overcome in the opening map. So I'm going to say this is another 2-0, being realistic. I don't think RBG will be able to pick off a map, and it's kind of one of their haunting flaws so far as a team, is that they get very close to winning maps and series versus teams like Payne Gaming. They'll get 13 rounds, teams like Extra Salt as well. They're capable of putting up decent numbers. I mean, even last season we saw High Coast, they put decent numbers on them and actually was able to win a series that got them into the 3rd place finish. But this season, starting it off very rough in playoffs here. So I think they'll get sent to the lower bracket very early. Next up, we got Team 1 versus Choco Check. This match is going to have a huge question mark on it, as Team 1 have been stepping their game up a little bit. The recent series versus RBG, of course, they got swept 2-0. Partially, that was a really good performance from Walco to get them to the 2-0, and when you have Walco stepping up, and then you just have like Hext and Classy as your background players, you're probably going to win that if you're RBG versus a team like Team 1. So they're in a weird form right now. I say this oftentimes on broadcast, but Team 1 is a team right now where they haven't quite gotten into form again. This is the same form, at least, since they've lost Barton. So it was a huge loss for them initially, and they headed into EU with that loss. And so when you're adding in a player like XNS, it's in place. It's XNS for Barton essentially is the trade they've made, and at one point they had Skulls, but XNS is currently one of the lower performers on the team, and Barton was such a consistent fragger that it put them in a really rough spot. Where at one point, Team 1, they did have so much capability with the rifles, and you had Mouths and Barton able to hit some nasty shots. They did look very good, and then now all of a sudden, they've lost Barton. I mean, it's been in quite a while now, but their time in EU, it didn't really show all that much, and so it could pose an issue. The reason why I think Team 1 is going to win this, though, is because they've been stepping into form recently. They've been winning matches, which is nice to see. But they're going to need a decent series here versus Choco Check. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I do think Choco Check are able to take a map off of Team 1. I think they're going to get sent to the lower bracket, but I think they'll maybe keep it competitive here. I think this will be one of the closer matchups in the opening stages. Next up, Party Astronauts versus Triumph. This has a big asterisk on it because Triumph currently, I'll go ahead and throw their roster open. They currently only have Cooper. They don't have the likes of Arcus on their roster right now. So they're not going to be playing with the 5 that we saw in the DreamHack qualifiers towards closed qualifiers. Instead, they're going to be rocking with Cooper. And the reason I find this kind of troubling is because if they're playing with Cooper, I think that Cooper has been in some rough shape this season with Triumph. I think he's not motivated. I think that's very obvious. And it's been playing into factor with the amount of kills he was able to get. I think last season he was top of the board. So I'll actually go. Yeah, I mean, look at the difference between season 36 and season 37. And I don't blame him for not getting motivated this season because he just went through the ringer here, and Triumph dropping at their team, I think, financially or something along those lines. So those are tough issues to deal with motivation-wise, and obviously the switch to Valorant is going to be huge. So with that being a factor and not having Arcus, it's going to be a 2-0. Triumph will not take a map off Party Astronauts, in my opinion. It's going to require some, I wouldn't say luck. I'm going to say it's going to require like maybe twice to show up pretty massively, kind of pull Cooper into a decent playoff run. But if that's not the case, if Twice doesn't show up, if Cynic, I don't even know if Cynic's going to be opping as well, so that's a factor. It's going to be a big playstyle difference between playoffs of Premier versus the DreamHack qualifiers. So I will say that's going to be probably a 2-0 for Party Astronauts. And I mean, I didn't even get to mention them, but they're in good form as well. They went 7-1, only dropping a series to Pain Gaming, so they're in very good form. But we'll go ahead and throw it over to GGPR versus RBG in the lower bracket. I think the big storyline for this one is that RBG are the better team. Right now, I think that GGPR are capable of taking off a map. That's going to be even iffy as well. I'm not certain if this GGPR roster can even take a map off of it, of RBG, if they're playing in good form. If they can put up good numbers against Extra Salt and, understand that it's a tough loss, you drew the short straw heading into playoffs, and build up some momentum off of that, off of taking some good rounds and putting up a hell of a fight versus Extra Salt. If RBG can do that, then I can see them closing this one out 2-0. But if RBG gets stomped by Extra Salt, that can probably lay into some of the confidence that RBG will have. And I feel like they are very, it seems like they're very momentum-based of a team in that sense. So I think GGP are capable of taking off a map for sure. And I imagine they'll be putting in work for these playoff series as well. So I think it's going to be 2-1, but I think this is where GGPR meet the end of their run. Another good playoff appearance from this roster, but they are going to be out pretty early, in my opinion. Which then leads to Choco Check taking on Triumph. This one's going to be a little controversial, but again, I just don't think Triumph are going to have what it takes to take down Choco Check. I think that this is a matchup that lives in Triumph's head at the moment. At the very least, Choco Check no longer have the advantage of having to play against Sheikh Zul's calling style, which 60 probably had a very good read on. Instead, they'll be forced to play against Cynic's calling style, which I imagine is going to be more loose. That might help out Triumph some. But I do actually think that Choco Check are going to be the better team. Again, it kind of comes down to Cooper being a big variable in this match. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is where Triumph end their run as well. And I think that might be a little bit controversial, but and again, Choco Check, you never know what they could just show up to the match, and not be hitting shots, which is, if that's the case, then it will be Triumph winning. But I'm going to go for a little bit of a risk here, maybe stir things up a bit, but I think this is where Triumph, they end their run here. Now, next up, Pain Gaming taking on Extra Salt. This one, I think, is going to be one of the best matches in the tournament. And the key here is that while Pain Gaming, I mentioned that they haven't lost a series so far. Extra Salt haven't either. I mean, pretty much. They forfeited against Choco Check because they were out of the country, as you can tell from the flag. But they haven't lost a map either, and I imagine Choco Check wouldn't have been able to take a map off them. If so, that would have been impressive, but we didn't get the chance to see that. And so, while it will be a really, really good matchup, it'll be fun to watch. I just currently think Extra Salt have a big advantage on Paint Gaming, and this is something that people might not really understand on the surface, but Extra Salt have so much that they can look towards against Paint Gaming. They have so many demos that they can go over that will allow for them to have an advantage, whereas Extra Salt have been kind of quiet. I think their last official matches, besides Premier, were in the CS Summit stuff. So with that being said, I think that that'll give Extra Salt a little bit of an advantage. That'll give them more of the tendencies of Pain Gaming, whereas Extra Salt have been really quiet. They have time to adapt their play styles. They can kind of change things up and not be so static. Extra Salt, or rather Pain Gaming, won't be having that luxury. They'll most likely be a little easier to read for Extra Salt if they're doing their work. And I imagine that this is kind of maybe one, if not one or two of the teams that Extra Salt are really going to be focused on beating in playoffs. And they have that luxury because of how good they are. So with that being said, I'm going to say 2-0 for Pain Gaming. Or rather, I'm sorry, Extra Salt. They're going to take it in a clean sweep here, at least in the upper bracket finals. If this was an upset, man, I would be very surprised. This leads to Team 1 versus Party Astronauts. A lot of people might not recognize this as a long-standing North American battle right here between these two teams, but I mean, for the entire time that I've casted, these two teams were the first team that I ever casted in Premier. This was the first matchup that I've ever casted in Premier, was Team 1, and at the time it was versus New England Whalers, but now Party Astronauts, and then somewhere in between their High Coast. But this one, both teams, they have an excellent read on each other, and I think that it'll come down to a little bit of, again, the current form of both teams. Team 1 have been stepping things up quite a bit, whereas Party Astronauts have been very, very consistent, and I think have surprised a lot of people. I mean, I know they've surprised nearly everyone in Premier with how their season went. I think a lot of people weren't even expecting this roster to be a playoff team. Viz has stepped into form quite nicely this season, which is lovely to see. I know that he's capable of a lot, and we're getting to see a little bit of that, whereas last season in Triumph, we didn't see as much of that. And so, with that being said, this one has been a tough one for me to decide, and I think that, like, looking at it reflectively, I think Party Astronauts are in the better form right now. I think that the amount of preparation they'll be afforded, because again, I don't think Triumph will put up a much of a fight. I think they'll have a good read onto what Team 1's game plan is going into this. They've already gotten the better of them once this season, and I think that it'll happen. But I think Team 1 take a map. Certain of it. As long as, I mean, I don't know what Team 1 would ban there. They looked horrible on Ancient. That could be a possible pick for Party Astronauts. I mean, this is kind of from my background on the Mythic Cup qualifiers, but Team 1, they looked really bad on Ancient, and Party Astronauts are so good on Inferno. This has been their bread and butter the entire season, and so that'll either force Team 1 to ban Inferno, which I don't think they'll do, and leave it open for Party Astronauts. Like, this one will truly come down to some map pool gaming right here, and I think that Team 1 will always have to worry about Ancient because they truly looked like they didn't know what they were doing too much on that map, and we're kind of just relying on like timings and spawns and stuff, whereas, you know, a lot of teams are kind of nailing down some of the defaults and stuff like that for T sides. But we'll go ahead and move on to the lower bracket. I'll take a nice sip of my drink and give you all some time to reflect. Go ahead and leave a comment so far if you think I'm an idiot. Or don't, I don't care. Team 1 taking on RBG. This one is going to be a very good matchup. Another kind of long-standing duel between these two teams. And this one's also very tricky to decipher. Team 1 has been in good form, but have just gotten swept by RBG with Walco popping off. And so you have to think to yourself, Team 1 feeling a little bit down heading into this season with that RBG sweep. They could have been in a better spot. I actually think they lucked out pretty hard in terms of their drawing on the bracket. But the thing is, I do not think Team 1 can take down RBG. I think RBG are going to get the better of them. But the caveat here is RBG can swing both ways, where they could have a really good game. They typically, last season is my sample size, 2 seasons ago they didn't do so well, but last season they had a great playoff performance and they really showed up. I think that's going to be the case here again. And like I was saying, Team 1, while they have been improving, while they were able to beat Pain Gaming in the Mythic Cup, I think that was a little bit of an outlier in terms of their results overall as a team. So we've seen these two teams go back and forth. Even this would be a rematch of the Mythic Cup where Team 1 was able to take down RBG. And so I think in playoffs and I think on Premier, we're going to see a little bit better performance out of RBG. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and give them the 2-1 edge here in this one. And it also might be a little bit of my NA bias as well. So I'll recognize it. But I don't know. It's tough to see. But I'm locking that one in. We're committing. Next up, Pain Gaming versus Choco Check. Not much to say about this one. 2-0. I think that no one would be surprised there. This is where Choco Check meet their end. They all get a win off a Triumph. That's all they'll be given. And I mean, that's all you can really expect from them. I think once they hit these walled opponents like, Pain Gaming or like an Extra Salt, anyone that can really, Team 1 as well. I think that Choco Check have struggled against Brazilian teams as well. So, whereas Choco Check are so, reliant on raw aim, and they do have it. They have a lot of talent in that department. What's really good is that, Pain Gaming have it, but they're just better, and then they have the tactics to back it up. They've got the better aim, and then they've got the better tactics as well. So with those two being a factor, and I know Choco Check have been hopefully working on a little bit of the strats. I saw something with Stamina talking to Nard out here, which is very promising. I don't want to generalize Choco Check as this pug team, but in this case, Pain Gaming are nearly certain to 2-0, just because they have that duo of just all around betterness. But with that being said, they'll move on, knock Choco Check out, and I'll go ahead and save this one for after this RBG versus Pain. I'll go to the lower bracket and get another elimination. And again, I don't think people should be too surprised. RBG, while they have stepped into form, I mentioned that one of their bigger problems is that against teams like the top tier of teams like Pain, like Extra Salt, they get 13 rounds, they can get 12 rounds, but they kind of choke at the finish line there. It's not necessarily choking. It could just be that they run out of steam. And, you know, there's been maps where I was like, RBG should have won that, but they did choke. But I think it's more if they do kind of get caught at the finish line. I think that you get a timeout called on RBG, or rather on the other team that RBG would be playing, and they somehow manage to get their way back into games. And so that is a factor that is so consistent. And unless RBG can topple that in this playoffs, unless they can find an answer to that consistent issue, I think this is where their playoff run will end. So 2-0 here for Pain Gaming. RBG, I think, can get 13. I think they can get 13 on both maps in this case. I haven't even mentioned that Pain Gaming's map pool is very strong right now. And specifically Pain Gaming's map pool against RPG. They're good on Mirage. They're good on Dust 2, whereas RBG isn't so good on those two maps. While they have been improving, it hasn't been a great factor. And on top of that, Pain Gaming's Ancient looks very nice. So that can play a factor as well. That can kind of force a ban out of RBG, and then they'll be really screwed. So we'll go ahead and hop into the upper bracket finals here. I think, yeah, upper bracket finals. Extra Salt versus Party Astronauts. And this one, going to be another good game. But I think the same, it's very similar here, where I think this is where the end of Party Astronauts bracket kind of fortune ends, because truly Team 1 and Triumph aren't the toughest opponents in my opinion. I think that they'll kind of get swept by Extra Salt. They might be able to put up a fight, but I think this is going to be 2-0, plain and simple. I think that Extra Salt are kind of right now just ready to take that last. Whether they secure it in this victory of Premier, or they secure it through world rankings, they're going to find their way into Pro League of Season 14. And I think that's everyone's goals here. I mean, it's very obvious that that's everyone's goals, is to try and get that Pro League spot. I think it would be a huge victory for Pain or Extra Salt if they're able to get that, even Party Astronauts being an unsigned team. But I don't think they just don't have it yet. I think this roster is capable of building something like that. But versus teams like Extra Salt and Pain Gaming, this season is not going to be your season to take it. But heading into the lower bracket finals here, we got Pain Gaming versus Party Astronauts, and the issue again for Party Astronauts is that they were able to avoid them. This is one where I truly think Party Astronauts could pull off an upset, but I don't think they will. I think it's possible. I think that Party Astronauts are capable of pulling off a map, and if they can if they can make that grand final, or upper bracket final rather, that'll be very impressive. But the issue is that Party Astronauts, again, have such tough competition. They lost to Pain Gaming already in Premier 2-0, where Pain Gaming really took it to them. Didn't give them much breathing room. I'll actually show that one. They it was a 2-0. If I'm remembering correctly, it was very dominant as well. Yeah, I mean 16-7, 16-5. And you can see Pain Gaming, they've got this pick in their map pool here, which is very exciting. And they look good on it too. So, with that being a factor, what is it that Party Astronauts is going to have on Pain Gaming other than some confidence heading into this final match? Because they were able to make it this far into the bracket as like an on-signed team. And as like, to be fair, the first season with this core, you know, they have a lot of returning faces at Party Astronauts. We've talked to Monster over on the Dust 2 channel about that, but the problem at the end of the day is that they don't quite have the same amount of firepower that Pain Gaming has. And on top of that, Pain Gaming is developing this map pool by including Ancient. that should really give them some advantages. But that being said, I think Party Astronauts can take a map off, take it to a third, and give Pain Gaming a run for their money. And that, again, this is just my predictions. This is me going off of what I think the teams are in current form. And so Extra Salt versus Pain Gaming, final series. So in this case, Extra Salt would have the one map advantage in the best of 5. This would be a best of 5 here. And I think it's going to be a 3-1 for Extra Salt. I think that Pain Gaming, unless Extra Salt do end up banning, what's it called? Unless Extra Salt end up banning Ancient, then Pain Gaming probably don't win a map. I'm not sure if Extra Salt will do that though. But 3-1, I would say. I think Pain Gaming are capable of catching Extra Salt off guard on an Ancient pick. But again, it comes down to the same factor of there'll be such an easy read for Extra Salt to have on Pain Gaming, and these teams already know the tendencies. Extra Salt probably have this factor of being inside of Pain Gaming's head by winning so many finals in a row against Pain Gaming, where Pain Gaming's always making it to these finals. They always fail at the finish line because Extra Salt is their opponent, and Extra Salt is one of those the best team in North America in the tier 2 space, in the premier level. And I would even venture that they're kind of entering into that tier 1 stage. Maybe not quite reached it there, but just kind of based off of the results of the Fun Spark tournament where they made it to the grand finals as well. I think that this team shows a lot of promise, and I think they'll be making their spot in the Pro League of Season 14. But yeah, that's everyone's goal right here, is to make it into Pro League of Season 14, and I think that it will be Extra Salt making it that way. So, guys, with that being said, with all of that action over and done with, make sure to tune in on my Twitch stream tomorrow at 7 p.m. EST. That's when I will be streaming. I'll be streaming Party Astronauts versus Triumph. I think that'll be a good match. ESL will be covering these 2 matches, I believe. I think they'll be covering Extra Salt RBG and Pain Gaming versus GGPR. So, if you want to watch any of these tournaments, go and hit those streams up. Show some support for North American CS:GO. Follow me on Twitter at Extra20. Like and subscribe to the video. Get me to 100 subs. And with that being said, guys, have a wonderful night. And I will see you all tomorrow on the stream. Peace.